A long drought. In the 1930s, much of the United States went through an extreme drought. The Great Plains region between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains was hit the hardest. Weeks of dry weather stretched into month after month with scarcely any rain. The drought was especially bad from 1934 to 1936. The drought came at a terrible time. The United States was already suffering through the Great Depression, which began in 1929. All across the country, many people were out of work. Many families lost their homes. Everyone was struggling to survive. During the Great Depression, most people in the Great Plains farmed for a living. To make more money, farmers planted more crops. This practice was hard on the land because it wore out the soil and led to soil erosion. When the drought struck, the soil dried out and turned into dust. Winds easily stirred up the dust and carried it into the air. A haze of dust often hung in the sky for days after the winds died down. As the terrible drought wore on, these dust storms happened more frequently throughout the Great Plains. The worst dust storms struck parts of 5 states in the area that became known as the Dust Bowl. Storms in the Dust Bowl did tremendous damage. Dust piled against houses, barns, and schools. It covered roads and railroad tracks, yards, and porches. It clogged car motors and seeped into houses under closed doors. It made the air unhealthy to breathe. It even harmed people's lungs. The Dust Bowl's most destructive dust storm struck on Sunday, April 14, 1935. The Black Sunday storm was brought on by powerful cold winds that picked up dust as they raced across the Great Plains. As the storm approached, it looked like a dark, towering wall. It hit northern Oklahoma first and then roared south into Texas. It turned the afternoon sky as black as night. It moved so fast that people barely had time to run for shelter. During the years of drought, many farmers in the Dust Bowl felt hopeless. Eventually, they migrated west. Many tried to find farm work in California. For those who remained, help came slowly. The government set up programs to help farmers and taught them better ways to plant their crops. The farmers learned how to take care of the soil and make it productive again. They planted trees to keep the soil from blowing away. In the fall of 1939, the drought finally ended. A sense of hope returned to the Great Plains. With the lessons the farmers had learned, they once again began to produce large harvests. Number 1. Underline the sentence that best supports the conclusion that human behavior contributed to the Dust Bowl as much as the drought. During the Great Depression, most people in the Great Plains farmed for a living. To make more money, farmers planted more crops. This practice was hard on the land because it wore out the soil and led to soil erosion. When the drought struck, the soil dried out and turned into dust. Winds easily stirred up the dust and carried it into the air. A haze of dust often hung in the sky for days after the winds died down. Number 2. Read the following sentence from the passage. Choose 2 sentences that use the bold word in a way that has the same meaning as in the passage. As the terrible drought wore on, these dust storms happened more frequently throughout the Great Plains. A. The student wore their uniform inside out for Spirit Week. B. The team wore a patch in honor of the longtime coach who had passed away from cancer. C. The athletes' legs grew weak as the game wore on into triple overtime. D. The city had to close more and more schools as the budget cuts wore on throughout the decade. E. The student wore out the soul of their schools from so much running. Number 3. Which sentence best summarizes section 6 in the text? A. The farmers planted trees to keep the soil from blowing. B. After the drought, many farmers had to teach themselves how to grow better crops. C. After the drought, many people migrated west, especially in California, to find work. D. After the drought, many people migrated west to find work, or they had to teach themselves how to grow better crops. Number 4. Which of the following sentences best expresses the central idea of the passage? In the fall of 1939, the drought finally ended. B. The Dust Bowl's most destructive dust storm struck on Sunday, April 14, 1935. C. The worst dust storm struck parts of 5 states in an area that became known as the Dust Bowl. D. In the 1930s, much of the United States went through an extreme drought. Number 5. During the Great Depression, what did most people in the Great Plains do for a living? A. During the Great Depression, most people built railroads for a living. B. During the Great Depression, most people taught for a living. C. During the Great Depression, most people were in the medical profession for a living. D. During the Great Depression, most people farmed for a living.